Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're listening to the Podium Podcast from. Welcome back to another episode where it is, of course, the 2026 Chinese Grand Prix preview, the second round of the 2026 season in Shanghai. And after what was a definitely interesting first round in 2026 in Melbourne, we arrive here in China with a sprint weekend and realistically a completely different track. The first time that we'll be racing on a man-made permanent track instead of a park, which means that there will be, of course, more questions that need to be answered throughout the weekend. Throw in the element of a sprint weekend means that there's only an hour for the teams to get adjusted to these new regulations, to these new setups, to a new track, which means that there's a lot of pressure and little time to really succumb the pressure, let's say that. But of course, it is a completely different track to Melbourne. If we look at Melbourne, and I remember seeing a statistic on Reddit about the amount of recharge each circuit can allow and what kind of circuits are more battery friendly. Melbourne is arguably one of the lowest rated compared to this weekend Shanghai, which is one of the highest rated, which means that we'll see hopefully a lot less clipping, which is going to be difficult anyway with a massively long straight, but a lot less clipping and more time for the batteries to recharge themselves with realistically harder braking zones and shorter straights. If we look at somewhere like Sector 1, that's perfect. There are a lot of braking zones, less straights. I think there's only one straight heading into Turn 1. You've got that twisty and turny Turn 2 and Turn 3 before a quick dash to Turn 4. And then Turn 5, Turn 6, Turn 7, Turn 8, even all the way up to Sector 2, it is pretty much corner after corner after corner. I believe the only worry that the FIA and Formula 1 have is that massively long straight, over a kilometre long back straight to the penultimate corner, which will, if we see what happened in terms of before Turn 9 and Turn 10 in Australia, there will be some clipping issues, which, especially on the longest straight that we would have so far tested the car on, because if you look at it, maybe Barcelona, but people weren't pushing to the max. That will be a real test for them. The back straight will mean that maybe even halfway down straight we will have this clipping feature as we did in Melbourne, which means that there will be a dramatic decrease in speed, which the drivers cannot do anything about because the batteries are recharging automatically, which means that we won't see, well, I hope we will, but we won't see as many dive bombs going into the penultimate corner, which we've seen plenty of times, and also means it kind of ruins that top speed feel that you normally get when driving down the main straight. But we'll see. The FIA can always make changes to the in terms of the kilowatt usage of the MGUH, which means that there'll be less clipping. But of course, we'll only see after FP1 how severe it is. But there have also been a couple of people in the media which have, I suppose, after today, gained attention for some of the things they said. Especially people like Max Verstappen, who've come out in media and have said that they are not happy, of course, with regulations, but there is almost there have been talks for change and some, I suppose, implementations of different rules, and realistically, what's the right word to put it? But there is room for change, which the FIA and Verstappen have said, which is a bonus for what we saw in Australia, because that wasn't, for me, racing, which we got onto in the Australia review episode. Max said himself he's not happy with the regulations. He feels like it's too much of a video game, and as Carlos Sainz put it, it kind of loses the DNA of the sport which strives for innovation, strives for top speed, strives for absolute, I suppose, peak performance, which we really didn't see in Australia. It was more a kind of, I suppose, entertainment more than a rather sport in terms of overtaking and the easiness of overtaking, which we saw. But Lando Norris also said in the media, after Melbourne, these two have been the most vocal, the last two world champions, that there is a need for change. Not that the whole regulations need a complete shake-up, but just minor changes which could help qualifying mainly and overtaking definitely. Um, but talking about McLaren, a lot has been in the media this week about McLaren not really being happy with the amount of information and the amount of, I suppose, their package that they have received from Mercedes. McLaren, being a customer team of Mercedes, expected the same engine as Mercedes. When it came to Australia, they felt that they were hard done by and that they did not get the right engine and the full capacity of that Mercedes engine delivered to Woking, which means that Andrea Stella has publicly addressed this issue, stating that he would rather want the full package and none of what he calls rubbish, in all honesty. And so Mercedes have said that they have got the full package, but I think that there will be more talking about how Mercedes might have found maybe a couple of loopholes, in these regulations to kind of give McLaren, Alpine, and Williams a possibly weaker engine, which they do not have. Ferrari have also been in the media this weekend because they are sporting a new rear wing, which we saw in Bahrain testing. This almost Macarena type wing, which kind of flips on itself when the driver gets to a certain level of speed, and then as soon as they hit the brake, it kind of just flips back down in kind of a flippy floppy style, which we did not see in Australia. But with higher downforce needed in China, they have sported this wing, possibly to help with, as I said, cornering speed. Maybe they're just trying something different in terms of their setup. And they've also sported new almost inlets in the halo, stem, I suppose, which we don't know what it's for, but we'll see probably overcross this weekend to see if they make any progress with their wing. That's pretty much it, to be fair, from that side of your weekly roundup. Let's go on to the predictions now. And I was in a little bit of a tricky mood because it is, of course, a sprint weekend, which means that there is double the amount of points available, well, not double, but 6 more points available. And I'm really struggling on my biggest flop because I really do not know who it's going to be. But let's just go for the sprint quality and sprint race. The top 3, I think Antonelli will take sprint pole with Russell and Hamilton behind. And I think he will go on to win with Hamilton and Russell behind again. I think that the sprint will be interesting to see. If we saw what we had in the first 20 laps in Australia, then the sprint race will definitely entertain in a good way or a bad way, depending how you're looking at it. Now, in qualifying, who am I going to put? I'm definitely going to say 5th, 4th, and 3rd to be Verstappen, Antonelli, and Hamilton. I think Russell will take 2nd, and I do think that Charles Leclerc will be the pole sitter for China. He is a qualifying specialist, and I think around a track like this, where Ferrari look to have the edge over Mercedes in terms of cornering speed, which we saw in Melbourne, I think that they can definitely perform. Do I think he will win the Grand Prix? Well, you'll find out in about 20 seconds. But for 5th, 4th, and 3rd, I've gone for Antonelli, Verstappen, and Leclerc. And I've gone for the race winner, Lewis Hamilton. I think he will win the 2026 Chinese Grand Prix. Reason being, I think that he's absolutely superb at this track. He's got the most poles here. He's got the most wins here. He won the sprint race in last year from pole. He likes his track. This was his best performance last year, was at Shanghai. He looks really, really confident this year. He looks like he's could be a title contender if he gets his act together. A P4 in Melbourne, one of the best performances he's had in his Ferrari career. He definitely looks like a changed man, which means that coming into a track where he's done so well in the past, he will definitely win the 2026 Chinese Grand Prix. Middle, I've gone for Leclerc, Andy Russell, Verstappen, Norris, just based on vibes. Biggest good surprise, of course, I'm going to go for Lewis. I think he will do superbly well. I think people will definitely turn their heads at a drive like this, which he should perform on in China. Biggest flop, and I'm struggling, but I'm going to say McLaren. I just don't see them doing as well as people expect. I think that they had a really rocky start for the reigning world champions, and I believe that, in all honesty, they will not have the pace that they would have expected this time last year, and I think that they will struggle hugely in terms of fighting for the front, for the podiums. I think two drivers in the points would be a very, very solid weekend for them. Okay, and one crazy prediction. I'm going to say that qualifying will be, the top three in qualifying will be separated by only 2 tenths, which, if we saw in Australia last week, it would be a really, really bold statement. But I think that people have already in this week learned tricks and tips that they will definitely bring into this weekend to make that pack smaller. Weather-wise, it's looking like it's going to be a dry weekend. 15 degrees on Friday, 17 on Saturday, and Sunday there's only a 25% chance of rain, which means that it should be a straightforward weekend. No wet running yet so far in these 2026 regulations. Anyway, I think that will wrap up a short but sweet 2026 Chinese Grand Prix preview. Make sure to like and subscribe and have a simply lovely day. Goodbye.